heavy thunder of cannon fire shook the island and echoed through the forest as we gazed at the Union Jack fluttering above the trees. "It must be the mutineers, Ben," I said. "They couldn't wait to put to sea and have shown their hand now." "If that were Silver and his men, they'd fly the Jolly Roger. You'll make no doubt of that." "No, that's your friends, young Jim. I reckon there have been blows, and your friends have made the best of it. And here they are ashore, in the old stockade as was made years and years ago by Flint." Ah, he was the man to have an headpiece, was Flint. Barring rum, his match was never seen. He was afraid of no one. Except Silver. Silver was that genteel. Well, that may be so, and so be it. All the more reason that I should hurry now and join my friends. You're right, boy, you're right. But rum wouldn't bring me there where you're going. Not rum wouldn't, oh no. Then the strange old man gripped my arm and brought his face close to mine. "I trust you, Jim, I trust you. So I'll tell you this. Tell your born gentleman friend that when Ben Gunn is wanted, to come alone to the place where you saw me first today. I've got secrets that no one else knows, Jim. Secrets and reasons all of me own. And I'll tell you something else, Jim. If them pirates make camp ashore, what'd you say but there'd be widows in the morning?" A cannonball had torn through the trees and pitched into the sand only a few yards from where we were standing. It caused each of us to take to our heels in a different direction. For a good hour, the frequent reports shook the island, and cannonballs kept crashing through the woods around the stockade. This was a dangerous spot to be in, so plucking up heart, I crept down among the shoreside trees. By this time, the sun was setting, the sea breeze rustling and tumbling in the woods and ruffling the grey surface of the anchorage. And after the heat of the day, the cool air chilled me through my shirt. The Hispaniola still lay where she had anchored, but sure enough, there was the Jolly Roger, the black flag of piracy, flying from her peak. And even as I looked, the ship's cannon fired once more. This was the last of the cannonade, and I lay for some time watching the bustle that succeeded the attack. Men were demolishing something with axes on the beach near the stockade. The poor jolly boat I afterwards discovered. Away near the mouth of the river, a great fire was glowing among the trees, and between that point and the ship, one of the gigs kept coming and going. The men whom I'd seen so gloomy that morning, quite different now, for there was a sound in their voices that suggested rum. At last, I made my way along the top of the beach, heading towards the stockade. With the firing over and darkness to help me, I felt sure I would soon be able to rejoin the squire's party. It was as I walked carefully in the half-light that I noticed the large, isolated rock that stood on a spit of land running out towards Skeleton Island. Rising from some bushes, it was quite high and peculiarly white in color. It occurred to me that this might well be the white rock where Ben Gunn had hidden his boat. A place to remember if we were to regain the ship. Turning inland now, and taking care lest any pirate should be in the vicinity, I approached the stockade cautiously from the shoreward side. Though I was well away from the lush green foliage of the swampland, the vegetation was still dense, and I moved slowly. Then, pushing aside a tangle of low-hanging branches, the whole stockade came into view before me. So this was Flint's old camp, and what a good job he and his men had made of it so many years before. The timbers of the stockade, completely surrounding the clearing, still stood firm, and the tree stumps, now half covered in sand, told of the forest that had once covered the area. In the center, at the top of the knoll, stood the small blockhouse, with firelight flickering through the windows and the porch. It was under this porch that a little spring welled up into an artificial basin of a rather odd kind. No other than a great ship's kettle of iron, with the bottom knocked out and sunk into the sand. I looked around me for a moment and saw no sign of man or beast. The night was quiet. So quickly I clambered over the stockade and ran silently to the blockhouse.
Oh, good heavens, Jim, lad. Where have you been?
The welcome I received inside was a great relief. The squire and his party, it seemed, had taken me for dead, and at my unexpected reappearance they were delighted. I must admit that I'd been unsure of their reaction, thinking they might look upon me now as one of Silver's kind. But no. When I put this to them, the squire dismissed it in a minute. My dear Jim, there was never any doubt in your loyalty. Only concern as to your welfare. But you're back with us now and unharmed, and thank God for it. By now there was a cold evening breeze blowing. It whistled through every chink of the rude building, sprinkling the floor with a continual rain of fine sand, and causing the smoke from the fire to eddy round the room. Very little found its way out through the hole in the roof that served as chimney. At last, my eyes became accustomed to the smoke and the dim light within the blockhouse, and I noticed that apart from the squire's party, one of the crew, a likeable man called Gray, was also with us. This was heartening. But what of Mr. Redroof, the squire's gamekeeper? Of him there was no sign. The squire must have been reading my thoughts. He motioned to the side of the room, and there lay a body, covered by the Union Jack. Poor Tom. Poor old Tom, said the squire. I'm afraid he didn't make it, Jim. They got him with a pistol shot. There were tears in his eyes as he told me this, and I realized just how fond the squire had been of his old gamekeeper, a man he'd known all his life. I was then made to sit close by the fire and recount my adventures. I told of my flight, of the murder I had witnessed, and of how we could get in touch once more with Ben Gunn. Poor fellow, said the doctor. Poor fellow. We must help him if we can. At least he can have some cheese. And with that he took out his snuff box. The reason you've never seen me take snuff, gentlemen, is that in this box I carry a piece of Parmesan cheese, and very nutritious too. That's for Ben Gunn. Well now, Jim, you've told us your tale. Let me now tell you ours. And so the doctor related all that had happened since midday when I had gone ashore. The doctor and the squire had spotted me running inland from the leading boat, and were in great fear that they might never see me again. But there was little they could do, for 6 of the pirates were still aboard the ship. For an hour or so, little happened. The Hispaniola lay at her moorings, and all was quiet aboard and on shore. But it was an abominable place. The heat became intense, with the pitch bubbling in the seams, and a foul stench rising from the swampland that warned of fever and dysentery, and the need to leave the anchorage as soon as possible. It was the doctor at last who made the decision to go ashore to see the lie of the land, and search for the stockade marked on Flint's chart. Together with Hunter, he set off in the jolly boat, and they pulled steadily for the shore, while the pirates looked on with some suspicion, though with no great alarm. They held course to the east, and at last pulled round a bend in the coast that completely hid them from view. Then they made straight for land and ran the jolly boat onto the beach. Hunter was left on guard, and the doctor, a silk handkerchief under his hat for coolness' sake, and 2 primed pistols at the ready, made his way inland. He found the stockade easily, within 100 yards, and here he paused. Even from the perimeter, he could see the whole place was in good order. The timbers had stood up well to the weather, and the blockhouse on its small knoll afforded a good view around the whole clearing. The air here was fresh, unlike the swamp. But most important, there running from the blockhouse porch was a spring of fresh water. It was the presence of this spring that convinced the doctor. Here was as good a place as any to make a stand when the time came. for there was precious little water on the ship. And just as the spring indicated the place, so that dreadful scream served as a warning for action. The doctor looked around him grimly. Where had the scream come from? Near or far? With so many echoes, it was difficult to tell. Worst of all, who was it, and what had happened? This he had no way of knowing, but of one thing he was sure: the fighting had started, and the whole cabin party must now come ashore and prepare to defend themselves in this stockade. Within a very short while, Dr. Livesey and Hunter were back on board the Hispaniola, and it was soon agreed that everyone should go ashore at once, with as much in provisions and arms as they could take with them. But what of Silver's men? They huddled together up forward, grumbling in the heat, and worried no doubt by that terrible scream. Then Captain Smollett stepped forward, a brace of pistols in his hands and a steely glint in his eyes. "Mr. Hands, here I am, armed and ready to kill. If any man makes a signal of any description, I shall fire. Now get below quickly, and if anyone thinks of making up for the muskets, I warn you that Redruth is armed and waiting." And as the captain stood guard on deck, with Redruth below, the doctor, Hunter, and Joyce took the first boatload of stores ashore to the blockhouse. It was a long haul, but within half an hour the doctor had returned, leaving the two men on guard in the stockade. Once more the boat was loaded, this time with pork, powder, and biscuit as its cargo, allowing only a musket and cutlass apiece for the last 4 passengers. The rest of the arms and the powder were dropped overboard in 2.5 fathoms of water. It was when the doctor, Redruth, and Squire Trelawney were aboard the jolly boat and waiting to cast off that the captain called out once more to the pirates. "Now, men, do you hear me?" There was no reply from below. "Abraham Gray, it's to you I'm speaking. I'm leaving this ship, and I order you to follow your captain. I know you're a good man, so perhaps are some of the others. Now, I give you just 30 seconds to join me." For a moment, there was silence. Then a sudden scuffle and the sound of blows. At the end of it, out burst Abraham Gray, his cheek pouring blood, but a grin upon his face. "I'm with you, sir, and gladly," he called, and the next moment he and the captain had dropped down into the boat and they were underway. With the boats so loaded, 5 grown men and all kinds of provisions, they made slow progress towards the distant beach. But this was of no great concern. The pirates on land, having no muskets, would not dare come near, and the mutineers aboard had no means of chasing them. But in their haste, the party had forgotten one thing, which nearly caused their downfall. It was the cannon on board the Hispaniola. "Right now, row for all you're worth," shouted the captain to Gray, and together they bent to their oars. "And you, Mr. Trelawney, sir, you're said to be a good shot. See what you can do with a musket." The squire knelt aft in the small boat, steadying his aim. Then Gray called to him, "Sir, aim for Israel Hands. He's the one that's causing all the trouble. He was Flint's gunner, and a good one at that." Trelawney was as cool as steel. "Trim the boat," he called, and as they steadied, he fired. Alas, Israel Hands survived, for as the shot was fired, he bent over the cannon, and it was another pirate whose screams we heard. But there was no time for another shot. They were near the shore now, and with luck would make a safe landing. But no, another missile fell close by. It swamped the boat, which slowly settled stern first into about 3 feet of water. So far, there was no great harm, no lives were lost. But the supplies were at the bottom, and 2 of the muskets. Even as a further cannonball landed nearby, they made the beach, and none too soon, for now Silver's men were moving in through the trees.
Go behind you!
But near the stockade, help was at hand, for Hunter and Joyce fired on the pursuers from the blockhouse, and at least one pirate was seen to fall. Then, as they prepared to clamber over the stockade, a single pistol shot rang out from the tree. Poor Red Ruth stumbled and fell his length along the ground. 5 minutes later, they'd carried him into the blockhouse. And all the time, despite his bloody wound, he'd made no protest. "Be I going, Doctor?" he asked. "Be I going?" "Tom," said the doctor, "you're going home." "So be it then," he replied. And without another word, he passed away. When the doctor had finished telling his story, we sat back quiet for a moment, all of us saddened by the death of poor Red Ruth. Smoke still eddied round the room, and now and again the faint sound of singing floated to us on the breeze from the pirates' camp. At last, the doctor spoke. "I do believe the rum is on our side, gentlemen, as will be the fever that must come to them from that swamp. They won't be so happy in a day or two." "That may well be so, Dr. Livesey," answered Captain Smollett. "But they sound in good heart now, and we must remember that they still outnumber us. From the 2 accounts we've heard tonight, it seems that there's some 14 or 15 men to our 7. So we better divide into watches and prepare for a long night." And so it was that the Squire and Gray took the first watch. The doctor turned to as cook, and the rest of us set to work. There was more firewood to collect, a grave to be dug for Red Ruth, stores to be checked, and muskets cleaned ready for battle. And as we went about it, the captain moved from one to another, keeping up our spirits and lending a hand wherever it was wanted. At last, all was done. We'd eaten supper, built up the fire, and I lay down wearily to sleep. As I dozed off, I could hear the pirates roaring and singing in their camp, and it made me wonder just what lay in store for us on the morrow. Rest had long been up and had already breakfasted when I was awakened by a bustle and the sound of voices. "Flag of truce!" I heard someone say, and then immediately after, "Everton Buff! 'Tis Silver himself!" And sure enough, there were 2 men just outside the stockade. One of them waved a white cloth. The other was Long John Silver. It was still early morning with a chill that pierced into the marrow. The sky was bright and cloudless overhead, and the tops of the trees shone rosily in the sun. But all about, at knee height, there was a white vapor that had crept out from the swamp. It was plainly an unhealthy spot. "Keep indoors, all of you. 10 to 1, this is a trick." "Who goes? Stand or we fire!" "Flag of truce! Flag of truce, I say! Captain Silver, sir, to come on board and make terms." "Captain, eh? My, this promotion." "I know of no Captain Silver. Who is he?" "It's me, sir. These poor lads have chosen me captain after your desertion. We're willing to submit if we can come to terms. Will you let me enter under a flag of truce, Captain Smollett?" "I have no desire to talk to you, Silver, but you can come in if you wish. If there's any treachery, then God help you." And so it was that Silver, all tricked out in his best, entered our stockade, came over to the blockhouse, and sat outside the porch to talk to Captain Smollett. "Well, here, Captain, and what a sweet, pretty place you have of it here. Young Jim, the doctor, and Gray, I see. All like one happy family." "If you've anything to say, man, better say it and fast." Right you are, Captain Smollett. And I'll say first that was a good ploy of yours last night. Some of you pretty handy with a handspike end. And I'll not deny that some of my people were shook by it. But we won't let it happen again, I tell you. We'll post sentries and ease off a point or so on the rum. You may have got one of us with a spike, but not another. Captain Smollett remained as cool as can be, though like the rest of us, he must have wondered what Silver meant. But then my mind went back to Ben Gunn, and I remembered his words. If them pirates make camp ashore, what did you say but there'd be widows in the morning? No doubt it had been Ben who'd paid the drunken mutineers a visit. I reckoned with glee that we now had one less pirate to deal with. Then Silver continued. Give us the treasure chart, Captain, and stop shooting poor seamen and stoving off their heads while they're asleep. Do this, and I'll give you a choice. Either come with us when the treasure's found, and we'll drop you safe ashore somewhere, or we'll leave stalls for you here and send back the first ship we meet to pick you up. I speak on me honor, Captain. And let all hands in the blockhouse hear, for what he spoke to one, he spoke to all. Is that all, Mr. Silver? Every last word, by thunder. Refuse that and you've seen the last of me but musket balls. Very good, said the captain, rising to his feet. Now you'll hear me. If you all come up one by one, unarmed, I'll clap you in irons and take you home to a fair trial in England. If you won't, then I'll see you all to Davy Jones. You can't find the treasure. None of you are fit to sail the ship. And anyway, you don't know a course to set. Accept my terms, or I'll put a bullet in your back when I next meet you. Tramp, my lad, bundle out of here hand over hand and double fast. No one moved to help Silver to his feet.
You filthy swab.
So growling the foulest oaths, he crawled as far as the porch, hoisted himself onto his crutch, then spat in the spring. Them that die'll be the lucky ones. Then he turned and set off for the stockade. But the captain now was in fighting mood and sent us rushing to our posts with his orders. Quarters, gentlemen. Just look at you. Silver's men could attack now and you'd not be ready. Mr. Trelawney, sir, I'm surprised at you. And you, Doctor. I thought you'd worn the King's coat before. We stood ready for battle, all a little ashamed. Now stand by, ordered the captain. I expect a quick attack. And as if in answer to his words, a shot ricocheted off the woodwork. The battle had commenced. What now?